are dynamic, engaging, and also enhance people's basic skills and even their performance on standardized tests. Because our evidence is, from the schools that we look at, if you do all the right things in terms of learning, if you engage the kids, if you respond to the ways that they learn best, if you broaden the curriculum so the arts lifts them up and gets them connected, you will also, even within the existing second way system, get good results and continuous improvement on your standardized tests. You can have your cake and eat it. So we begin to change the second way, I think, with you. Not by you attacking the governor and his or her policies, but by you influencing parents and the public so that the governors have to shift their policies in order to respond to the public. That, I think, is the fundamental shift.
Let me go back to your question, which is what question I want to answer. The question I want answered is, in addition to what kids got to know, what do kids need to be able to do? And I think the current model is based on what they need to know as opposed to what attributes or what skills they have. And I think it's a profound contribution to the discussion. And by the way, you want to put reflection on the list, I'm all for that. So, but I don't think that's going to be a unified conversation. I think that's going to be community by community. And I don't think the federal government ought to impose the answer. I think the federal government, in the name of national standards, may be able to do a little bit more to help us with a minimum standard for critical thinking, a minimal standard for communication. But I want individual districts around the country to have this conversation and come to their own conclusion. So that's my answer to your question is, I think we're stuck in a mode where 90% of our work in education is about what kids should know. And I want my answer, the contribution I think P21's made to the conversation is you got to broaden your model from knowledge to something plus knowledge. And you have to have agreed to a model that's bigger than just content mastery. Now, I have a couple of other things that, a couple other observations I want to make. One is, I've not said anything about race to the top. But I think that, and I have a lot of friends trying to administer it. But it's a good example of a focus on strategy and not outcomes. So when they say a state needs to have better quality teachers, have better data quality, they're all strategies. They're not engaged in a conversation about what are the new student outcomes. And what's worse is that they've basically run the U.S. Department of Education as though it's a foundation and giving grants to some minor grantees without articulating a vision for every child, every parent. They've exacerbated this issue, by the way. They're not going to the communities outside of Race to the Top and saying, here, you need a vision. Okay, if you're one of the 15 state winners, congratulations. What about the other 35 states? I think I personally think the strategy they've taken on doesn't give a vision to the rest of the country. It's, you know, so I agree and I understand that they're in the lever business and they're trying to figure out what levers do we have to twist to create a better contract in this state or create better charter school laws in that state. And but those are strategies. That's not a vision of what education needs to become. Charter schools is a strategy to some other end. And so is data. Data is a strategy to some other end. And so the pinnacle, the building blocks of their strategy in Race to the Top doesn't include a vision of what children need to be able to do in the 21st century. So I have great problems with that sort of as an incomplete strategy. The last piece is, I really want to take on this issue. You do it in your articles, and I'm just so glad I have the opportunity to respond to the article, is this notion of middle-class jobs is not very compelling to me for the following reason. Why aren't you concerned about the person who's stuck in the Starbucks? What's his ticket out? So I guess what I would say is that I think that our work is bigger than just for the companies. Our work is what happens when the company strategies turn over these kids. What are the kids going to do next? And I would say if they can't critically think And if they can't communicate effectively, when the companies spit them out, they won't be able to transgress through 10 jobs and 4 careers. So I look at the 4 C's as a set of survival skills. And I think that what we've articulated, whether the companies intended it or not, is that if that, if there is the kid, we didn't say it was Starbucks, I just assumed it was.
I wouldn't say.
I know,
no,
but
no.
I'll pretend it. I'll pretend it was Starbucks. Yeah. Look. Here's how I would say it, and then maybe you can help me with this. My vision of where I was in the 50s and 60s was somebody said to me, if you master this content, you'll have a career for 30 to 40 years. That's pretty much what the deal was, and it was pretty much true. If you got a 95 on the content, you'd find a career for 30 to 40 years. That contract's gone. And so what I'm interested in is now that we can say that you're probably having 3 to 5 careers and you're going to have 10.4 jobs by 42. What is it that you have to have by the time you graduate 12th grade, community college, 4-year institution, that will allow you to negotiate all that change? Now, I'm not for it. I wish it was 8.6 or 7.2. But that young man or young woman in the Starbucks needs these skills to get out of the Starbucks. And so I don't know how we've twisted critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity and innovation into a nefarious plot. I think it's a ticket up the economic ladder, and it's the equivalent of what I was told when I was in the 50s and 60s, except the contract's different. So I think that the real problem today is that the system keeps telling them, if you get good grades, you'll have a ticket up the economic ladder. It's not true. So that's nefarious. Why don't we be talking about how nefarious the system is that is basically implying that they're going to be okay when they're not? And I think that that's as corrupt. So I think when the businesses step forward, I've spent 25 years representing business and been told, that we're basically the skunk at the picnic. I think that it's been in this country, and I think the 21st century skills movement, even in your own embracing of saying, well, we didn't get it quite right, but we got like 3/4 of it right or 2/3 of it right. We never would have been able to do it without the business advocates at the table. That's been our credibility card. If it was just the NEA and the AASL, we would have been told to take a hike a long time ago. But because we had Microsoft, because we had Intel, because we had the Ford Motor Company, it's had some credibility. And I might spend a lot of time kicking them over. They didn't quite get it right. They've got some nefarious, but I think in general, this work has been sending the mission of education generally in the right direction. And I think that you've pointed out a set of goals that they ultimately ought to aspire to, which I don't think are unreasonable goals at all. I'm not sure in the current political environment in the United States they're workable in a lot of settings, but as I said, I personally aspire to the ones you've identified.
Just two small caveats to that. Well, one is I would add to what you need to know and be able to do. A third, which is in the spirit of everything you say, is because when we talk about what we want a child to know and be able to do, in a sense we're talking about what we as a country want to know and be able to do. And I would add to that what we want people to be able to be. What UNESCO years ago had 4 areas of learning, the Delors report. What you know, what you do, what you're going to be, and what you're going to be in relation to others, in relation to the world around you. And their critique was that almost everything is about what we should know and do, and not enough or at all about what we should be and for ourselves and how we should be with others. So that's just like the first, but I think it's in the spirit of what you say.
Yeah, and by the way, maybe we should both say that one of the great contributions that ASCD has made is that the work on the whole child has been a huge contribution to that conversation, and that probably ASCD, more than any organization in the country, has contributed intellectual thinking to that, to that last piece, which I think has been